to buy that material. So if you think about what it means in the book of Revelations about why buy and sell is in there, and the Lord put that in there for a reason. It's because, I believe, it's because it's complete control of your life. It's not just some aspects of it, it's complete control. And we're going to go into some other examples, but that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Now, to give you, so if you go to the next one, please. You're going to hear a lot of things today. So I'm going to say I am not anti-technology. I have a PhD in engineering, okay, in a specialty of electrical engineering. I've got almost 50 years of supporting myself by dealing with high technology. So I can't be anti-technology and do those sorts of things. But I believe that the Lord has given me the ability to understand technology so that maybe I can impart it to you all about what's coming. But also you can use it, I think, to maybe reach people who are on the fence and who are sort of thinking about this, and you start talking about Book of Revelation, what happens during the tribulation period, and what does the mark mean? I mean, the mark means more than buy and sell. It means you're going to worship, you're going to do all these things. But again, if you don't have your eyes open, you might be surprised. You might want to ask, what can I do about it? Well, first off, the Lord tells us in the book of Revelations what's going to happen. We don't have a choice in that. We may be sleeping while that happens, but if you're not, then you probably need to understand what's going on. I'm not talking about when tribulation starts. I have no idea. Just like the rest of us, we just need to be ready. I think part of the reasons I'm putting this out there is if you're sitting on the fence about trusting in the Lord, maybe this will push you off the fence onto the right side. I don't know. But you need to think about this if you're sort of wavering, or if maybe your faith is a little wavering. Anyway, so I'm preaching, I apologize. That's what I'm doing. So let's talk about what the mark means. So we're going to go to Revelation 13:17. So that they could not buy or sell. And that's, to me, the crux of the problem. If you can't buy or sell, you can't feed yourself. You can't feed your family. Nothing, right? Again, like I said, everybody on a regular basis engages in financial transactions on a daily basis. And globally, with 7 billion people, give or take, there's somewhere on the order of 100 to 150 billion financial transactions that continue on a regular basis. And you might think, well, that's way too much data for anybody to control you over. And we're going to tell you why that's not. And I'm going to show you why, with the technology that's today, why all of that can be monitored and reacted to in what we call in the service real time. Within a couple of seconds of you doing that, somebody knows what you've done. Unless they take the mark, right? Which is the name of the beast and the number of his name. 666, right? But again, I'm focusing on the buy and sell and the complete control that implies to you. So again, like I said, it's complete control. It's not just the little aspects. I'm not going to allow you to go to the grocery store, or I'm not going to allow you to go to the doctor's office. No, it's everything. Buying gas for your car. Anything that you think of, anything that you have, the clothes you're wearing. Again, like I said, just think about how your lives revolve around financial transactions, whatever that may be. And the reason I bring this up, if you're sitting on the fence and the tribulation starts, how hard is it going to be to give your life to the Lord when all of these things are on top of you and you haven't done it already. Just think about that for a minute. And the reason is, let me give you an example. All of us are of an age, mostly. You have grandchildren. Hey, you know, Tom, if you don't take the mark, I'm not going to give your grandchild that operation that they need. Wow. If you don't have the Lord's backing, and if the Lord doesn't have your back already, what are you going to do? And that's why I put this stuff out there, just so that you understand and you have the ammunition you need to do what's necessary. And again, like I said, what can you do about this? Get right with the Lord, because this is coming. So again, why discuss the topic? The pieces of the puzzle are coming together. We're going to talk about specific technologies that I believe are useful in affecting that complete control. So we're discussing the topic. I've sort of given you why I'm here. Is anybody willing to tell us why you're here? What are you hoping to find? And I say that for two. What are you hoping to hear? And I say it for two reasons. Number one is, if the material I got today can help answer your question, then good. But if a question that you have can't be answered by the material I have today, I'm very happy to go look it up for you and help you look it up, and so that you can get some more answers to your questions. And today, along those lines, you're going to see videos. At the end of this presentation, you're going to have, there's a set of references. There's going to be all the videos and all of the information where it came from. So it's referenced. I don't have footnotes. I didn't do that. So, but you'll be able to see it. Most of the videos are much longer than what we're going to watch, and I encourage you to go look at them. As a matter of fact, for the folks live, YouTube tends to help you if they think that video that you're going to see is proprietary, and it may cut it off. After the presentation, Darla will have a copy of the entire presentation, including all of the videos. So contact her, and she'll be able to get you the whole thing. And for you folks as well, if you want this, especially the references page. Yeah, especially the references. I don't know if you know, some of you know I taught for many years at the University of New Mexico, and I'm big on references, so that you know that I'm not just making this stuff up. So Sue, hang on, go back please. So again, I'm not anti-technology, but technology is, as Einstein says, an axe, right? It's a tool, right? Technology is nothing more than a tool. It's great convenience these days. If you use Apple Pay or Google Pay or something like that, you just put your phone up to it. I do a lot of traveling for the Department of Defense, and it's kind of interesting. I'm still an old style guy, so I use cash all the time. Plus, I see a lot of cyber threat briefings, and I worry about using electronic banking. But you see most of the young folks these days using Google Pay, Apple Pay. Case in point is most of the Army posts, air bases have a nice food court. You can gather anything you want. Most of them use Google Pay or Apple Pay, and they just touch their phone to the receiver. Here comes the old guy up there with a $20 bill or whatever. So I don't use cash. I mean, I use cash not just because I know what can happen. Again, technology is neither good nor bad. It's in the hands of the user. So like I said, Einstein, you all know who he is, atomic energy. We got the atomic bomb out of it, but we also got clean electrical generation. And the Department of Energy, used to be the Atomic Energy Commission years ago, had a concept called Operation Plowshare. They were using nuclear weapons to try to figure out how to do mining. Have you ever been out to the Nevada test range? There's a great big hole in the ground, and it's like, I don't know how you mine something like that because it's radioactive for years. But again, you know, technology is just technology. It doesn't really matter what's being used. All the debates about guns and everything, it's a tool. They're all a tool. So any technology that's out there is a tool. As Einstein said, the axe in the hand of a murderer is different than the guy who wants to cut his wood. Andy Grove, who used to be the head of Intel, Grove also came up with the concept that computing power doubles every 18 months-ish. And so just things are getting better and better and better. And then the guy from Salesforce talked about it's neither good nor bad, it's who does it, who does it. Now, along those lines, I want to tell you, I am not a conspiracy theorist. So when we talk about the new communications technology called 5G, when we talk about quantum computing, when we talk about whatever, I'm not a conspiracy theorist that says there's a person in the government that's wanting to do these things. I do believe, though, that Satan is active in this world, and as we call it in the military, he's prepping the battlefield. And all of these things are out there. And it wouldn't take much for Satan or his representatives, the Antichrist, to get there and start using these things in the wrong way. So part of the reason for talking to you about this is so that you can see with eyes wide open when this stuff happens, when it goes from just being a convenience. We're going to talk about central bank digital currency as an example. When it goes from being a convenience to when it goes to being a sledgehammer to hit you in the head to make you do what you want, what they want. Not what you want, what they want. And that's the problem, is all of these things are being honed and refined. Like I said, Satan is active in the world trying to get this. He's prepping the battlefield. So as I said again, the puzzle pieces are coming together. If you go back through some of the technology discussions on the mark of the beast over the years, especially when atomic weapons were first used, because then there was a lot of people that said, well, they're just going to nuke us all if we don't go with the mark. But at that time, you couldn't really tell who was off. And there was a lot of people, my grandparents as an example, were living off the grid in the 40s, and you know, they didn't even have electricity until sometime in the 40s with the rural electrification process. Rural electrification consortium, I think is what it's called. Anyway, at that time, you could live off the grid because you had cash and you could do barter and everything like that. Next. So anyway, we're going to discuss the technologies first that can enable the mark. And then we're going to discuss 7 questions that put all of these technologies together and help you understand where I'm going with this. And I am not talking about all the technologies that are out there these days. If you would like, we can do another session later on. If you have questions about other things that you've heard about, seen about, heard people talking about, whatever, happy to do another one of these with maybe more in-depth, or any of these things that I'm just going to sort of brush over today, we can go ahead and do that as well. Okay, it's like I said, we're going to discuss the technologies first. I don't remember exactly how many there is. I think there's 8. And then we're going to do we're going to answer a set of questions that get us to some conclusions, I believe. Again, I've talked about it, but the type of control that's implied by the mark, again, it's total control. The beast is going to want to make you worship it, and therefore, how do you do that? Okay, and then how is that? The big thing is, okay, total control. We're human beings, granted by God with free will. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take the mark. Well, guess what? You will have a choice if you're still here, but the consequences of taking the mark is eternal damnation. Consequences of not taking the mark is being with the Lord. To me, if you're right with the Lord, it's an easy choice. But if you're not, it could, make you think about it. But once you make that choice, we're told in Revelation, that's the end of the conversation. There's no going backwards. Okay, so let's get started. We've got several videos, and my lovely assistant up in the booth will play the videos for us. And we'll just, I'm going to sit.
The emergence of the mark of the beast technology. We are living in an age of technological advancement like no other. The world we live in today is vastly different from the world 50 years ago. 5 decades ago, smartphones did not exist. The general public did not own a computer. There was no internet shopping, neither was there any social media. Is it undeniable that technology is becoming more and more a part of our everyday life? This has led to many theorists to come to the conclusion that with technology being so embedded in every part of our society, technology must be a part of the mark of the beast. Theorists argue that for Revelation 13 to come into fruition, the beast must be able to monitor individuals at a global scale, and the only way to do so is through technology. Revelation 13, 16 through to 18. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Theorists argue that technology will enable Revelation 13 to come into fruition in 2 ways. They believe that the mark of the beast itself will be a piece of technology, and that will be placed on the forehead or their right hand. They believe in order to enforce that all of humanity receive that mark, technology will be used to track and isolate those who do not have the mark. Now, we are going to look at these 2 points and see why some believe that the emergence of the mark of the beast technology has arrived. Firstly, it is important to note that we do not know yet exactly what the mark of the beast is and what the number 666 represents. For example, the recent breakthroughs in medical implant chip and RFID technologies have increased interest in the mark of the beast, spoken of in Revelation chapter 13.
So again, for those of you who are interested, the presentation itself has the entire video embedded in there.
The emergence.
So you can watch the whole thing, but it's about 15 minutes. And I didn't think you wanted to come here to just watch videos all day for 3 hours or whatever. Thank you, Sherry. Any questions? This is kind of an intro. Anything that's really weighing on you and something you want to hear about, talk about? Carla.
When it showed the slide with the 4 puzzle pieces, and it said AI is artificial intelligence.
So would you go back to that? I apologize.
That's okay. I was just wondering what those acronyms, there were 2 of them I didn't understand.
And I apologize. I was supposed to do that and I didn't.
Okay.
So stand by. So the upper left, CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. Okay. The upper right, the red one, 5G, 5th generation communications. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
IoT, Internet of Things. Internet of Things. Basically everything, and we'll talk about this more, everything will be wired together either wirelessly or with a wire so that you won't be able to get away from anything. I mean, a couple of years ago, Sue and I tried to buy a stove. You can't buy a stove without, they wanted to give us one with internet connection. It's like, for what? Oh, well, you can dial in from your phone and turn the stove on, or whatever. It's like, Okay, fine, whatever. If you've bought a car, so Internet of Things is everything, right? It's everything, your coffee pot, your toaster, everything. If you bought a car since about 2015, maybe 2018, it's got a internet connection. It's got a Wi-Fi connection in it. Maybe turned off, but it's got a Wi-Fi connection in there. And that way they can track your car. 95, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but cell phone, smartphone. 95% of the globe, depending upon how you count, has a smartphone access of some kind. And unless you pull the battery out, it is active and you're constantly being pinged. Pinged means basically the cell phone towers know where you're at. We'll talk a little bit more about how it does that if you want, and just know that basically anything you got, anything that you buy these days is probably going to have a Wi-Fi connection. And you've got to go to a fair bit of work to shut some of those off. It's quite interesting. So that's what Internet of Things is. It means everything is wired together. Now that implies, again, an enormous amount of data. And we'll talk about how much. But that implies an enormous amount of data, and it implies an enormous amount of computing capacity to track you individually and understand what you're doing. That's here as well, and it's being rolled out. Quantum computing as an example. Artificial intelligence. It's interesting to me reading some of the articles on artificial intelligence. I belong to an organization called IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and they report on all kinds of stuff. It is interesting to me, we're going to talk a little bit about this transhumanism, and technology is being used as if we can improve on what God's already done. Thinking that you're your own little God and you can do what you want with your body and you can improve it and things like that. Okay, it's one thing to do implants for somebody, a soldier who's been wounded in battle and maybe they got their spine severed. It's another thing to say, I want a neural implant because I want to be like a computer. Sometimes it's just interesting to me when I read these stuff about how Okay, so is this the next slide then, Sue? Okay, so let's talk about some of these things. And again, if I do this, the Department of Defense is really good for acronyms and then making a name out of the acronym. So if I wander into that, please stop me. Thank you, Carla, for picking up on that. So let's talk about central bank digital currency, CBDC. Some of you have probably seen that. Some of you wondering what it is. First off, there's a difference. You've also probably heard about FTX and crypto, Bitcoin as an example. Central bank digital currency and cryptocurrencies are not the same thing. And we'll see that in a video here, but there's a difference between them. And it's very, very, who controls that digital currency is why it's called central bank digital currency. It's controlled by the central banks. Cash as we know it will go away. There's several reasons given. Again, people who think they know better than me how to lead my life think, well, you don't need cash. You can use this electronic payment system. Oh, and by the way, it costs too much to create this coinage in the papers and distribute them and get them to the ATM, and the government pays for most of that. So yeah, they say, okay, there's all kinds of excuses about why central banks want to do this. And last year, I think it was April of 2022, President Biden signed Executive Order 14067 put that in your browser and you can see what it's talking about. But basically, it directed the Federal Reserve, which is our central bank, to cooperate with central banks across the globe, the European Union, China, Japan, as an example, to figure out how to do currency transitions through the digital currency and figure out how to do that. Now, in the book of Revelation, it talks a lot about the global government. To me, central bank digital currencies, getting rid of cash and then making it global is part of that process. And that's why I say Satan is active in here. And he is pushing these because then once there's a central bank digital currency, you can't even run away to Japan or Africa to hide. You won't be able to do that. But again, so the currency's out there and people are using it and we're being pushed that way. And in a reward punishment sort of scenario, it's kind of like during the Korean War when the US would create a script and they would give the script to the troops in view of dollars, right? Every so often, though, because the Koreans would figure out how to counterfeit it, they would have to confiscate all of that script and issue a new one. Something like that is coming down the pike. Basically, there'll be a reward punishment that says, okay, we are going to give you a 15% bonus for every dollar you rake out of your account and turn it in for digital currency. Whatever the number is, there'll be some reward punishment there in the beginning. And then eventually, I could see where it goes to the point where now all of a sudden we are told, okay, now it's law. You have to turn your dollars in and get this digital currency. And so, okay, and we're still going to give you the 15%. Eventually, there's going to be a punishment phase. It basically says, okay, today is the day that that's going to happen. Anybody who turns in dollars after this day is now going to lose 15% of their money. Because if you go read what's going on, the World Economic Forum is pushing central bank digital currencies big time. They think that it'll stop trafficking, drug trafficking, specifically arms trafficking, because now we can't trade in dollars. I tend to believe that at least in the beginning, it'll be like a rock in the river and the water flows around it, so these people will figure out how to do something different. But eventually, it's going to come to the point, that reward punishment phase, where it does get done. So money you have in a retirement account, an IRA, 401k, something like that, your investments, that's going to be easy. Because right now, unless you actually have that money in your sweaty hands, it's a digital currency. I mean, you can go and draw dollars on that, but eventually it's all going to be a digital currency. There will be no cash. I don't know when that's going to happen, but you can read Executive Order 14067 and just look at where people are going with this in terms of what they want to do. And go read this year's transcripts from the World Economic Forum. It's amazing to me, for several years, these types of things were just sort of whispered about. Now all of a sudden it's openly talked about. And again, the federal government will tell you that's because we want to save money. We don't have to print currency. We don't have to mint coins. I get it. We can stop this trafficking. We can stop money transactions for terrorism, things like that. But you can see where the rest of it's going. And if you think this monitoring currency is new, go back to the 70s with Richard Nixon and shutting down the gold exchange or pegging the dollar to the gold bullion. as well as I believe it was 1970, where they levied a requirement of reporting any transaction over $10,000. For all the years that Sue and I have been associated with the federal government, coming up to 50 years, anytime you had more than a couple dollars, we had to report on sudden affluence. So there's been a lot of this hanging around for years and years. 1970s, 52 years ago. So I talked about digital currency, and I talked about the number of transactions on a regular basis that happen daily. That information has to be pushed around, the network. It has to go from your ATM to the bank or wherever. If it all becomes digital, Starbucks, you go into Starbucks with your Apple Pay and you buy coffee there or whatever, all of those transactions have to go someplace. The information about those transactions have to go someplace. There's been talk for years about the current communication systems being overloaded and having problems. And you see it sometimes, especially in the older systems that the military and the federal government have in terms of communications capability. You just bog it down. It's really hard to push out 150 billion transactions a day over a telegraph. And that's kind of what some of the systems are these days. So the federal government is big time pushing what's called 5G, fifth generation, and next G, which is anything beyond fifth generation. We are entering a 5G. If you have a smartphone right now, yeah, odds are very good, unless you bought one of the 5G capable, it's probably a 4G. What does the G mean? It means generation. The first generation, 2000-ish, late 90s, 2000 was the old analog phones. Remember the old brick phones? That was an analog phone. It wasn't really called 1G, but that was the first generation. Second G, or 2G, was when you could send texts. Not with a pager, but with your phone. It's different. So SMS texts is the way that most people looked at it. Third generation, 3G, 2005, 2006, 2007, maybe up to 2010. People debate all day about when these things happen. It's like, okay. 3G was basically when you could do rudimentary browsing of the web. You could look at very poor videos. It was the system just couldn't handle a whole lot of data over the web. 4G, which most of you probably have right now. If you have a phone and you look up in the top right-hand corner, it says LTE. That's 4G, long-term evolution. 5G, depending on who you talk to. If you go to most of the major cities, Chicago, New York, wherever, you may, and you have a quote 5G capable phone, you might say 5GE. That's not really 5G, it's a 5G it's enhanced, but 5G is coming, and the academics, which I'm one because I teach at Marquette right now, are working on next G, 6G and beyond. 5G is not an evolutionary step from 4G, it's a revolutionary step. They went way beyond what 4G could do for you. So your phone, a 4G phone, might be able, you're going to see some of this in a video. I'm taking some of that. 4G phone might be able to handle 200 megabits a second, and that's in a good day. 5G can handle up to a gigabit a second. Now, what does that mean? It means you can, and I've seen this happen on the good 5G phones where they'll have a football game in one end and they're playing a game on the other side, and it's all interacting and things like that. So, and it's full motion video on the football game. It's not real spotty in the way it used to be. The military, right now, gainfully employed by the Department of Defense to try to figure out how to use 5G to make what they call increase warfighter lethality. That's the words they use these days. Sue, let's go ahead and with those two. So we got two videos here, one on CBDC.
Why is the Federal Reserve considering a central bank digital currency to replace the dollar? Hey everyone, I'm Ian King, and in this Winning Investor Daily Update, I'm going to talk about that topic. We're going to talk about what a CBDC is, the difference between a CBDC and a cryptocurrency, and also why the Fed wants to create a CBDC to replace the dollar. So we'll get into that. But before we do, if you like our content, please go ahead and hit that like button. Comment below because it helps us get our message out. We'd love to hear from you. If you're worried about central bank digital currencies or maybe you just don't care, please comment below and also subscribe to our channels. And lastly, I've got a full-length presentation on CBDCs. Please check that out. You can either click the link below or we'll post it right here above my head. So, what exactly is a central bank digital currency or a CBDC? Well, it's a new form of money because money has taken very various shapes and forms throughout human history. If you go way back to prehistoric times, they used rare stones and shells to basically have something that keeps track of value in the economy. And then in the Middle Ages, we used bronze and silver and gold. And more recently, central banks have moved towards issuing a paper currency. So you've got the US dollar and the euro, the Japanese yen. All these currencies are issued by a central bank. The reason why people need a sovereign fiat currency is because the governments require you to pay taxes in that currency. So that is how they're able to control the stock of money in the economy by requiring citizens to pay their taxes in it. Now, there's a big difference between central bank digital currencies, which is a new digital form of money, and cryptocurrencies. And it's very simple. A cryptocurrency has no centralized organization that's overseeing the creation and the distribution of it, right? All cryptocurrencies are governed by a decentralized protocol. In the case of a central bank digital currency, it's going to be just like the Fed issues dollars in our economy, but instead of giving you paper currency, they're actually going to have you use a digital system. And why is the Fed so gung-ho on CBDCs? Well, the first is there's a seigniorage cost. So in every economy that prints paper currency, there is a cost to bring that currency from the mint to ATMs and to banks. And this cost is burdened on the government. And it's not extremely high in the United States, but in areas in the world where they have various islands, such as the Philippines or Japan, there's a cost of bringing all that money back and forth to these outer lying areas. So that's one reason why. The bigger reason why, and what's really more important than you understand, is that the Fed wants to be able to track transactions in the economy, okay? And they want to know maybe in one specific state, the economy is slowing down because they can see the transaction growth has slowed down, or perhaps it's picking up somewhere else, and they want to be able to micromanage that. And then there's another reason why the Fed wants a central bank digital currency, and that is because when the Fed uses its tools, and they're very limited, they can decrease rates to zero, essentially interbank lending rates, and they can also do quantitative easing. But when they get to zero, they technically can't break what's called the zero lower bound. Okay, so you have the Fed, and you've heard them cut rates to zero before, and the next thing they do is quantitative easing. The reason why they can't cut rates below zero is because if they imposed a negative savings rate on the financial system, people would go to their banks and they would take out their cash and they would bury it in their backyard or, hide it under a mattress or do something that would remove cash from banks. And the biggest problem here is that we operate in a fractional reserve banking system so that the banks only have to maintain 10% of their reserves in actual deposits. And then they can go lend the rest out elsewhere. So if you had a bank run because the Fed was instilling a negative interest rate and everybody went to get their cash, you would have a total financial collapse. And so what the Fed is able to do with the digital dollar is say, if you have money at a bank, we can impose a negative interest rate on it, and there's nothing you can do. So that gives them the opportunity to basically put an expiration date on your cash, right? So let's say the economy is slow, people are saving too much, the Fed wants to drive consumption. They could punish savers, in a sense, by putting the rate not only to zero, but below zero, so that every year you're losing a little bit of money that's in that bank, and it forces you to either invest it somewhere or spend it on consumption. And I think that's really the big story with CBDCs. And obviously, there's the chance for government to have complete control over whatever you buy, who you transact with, et cetera. And that gets you into even scarier place. So, that is really the outline for central bank digital currencies. It's all about the Fed being able to have more control over the economy. I'd love to hear what you think about it. I mean, I'm personally pretty terrified about it. Please comment below. And also, please check out my full.
Okay, so
why is
the whole issue is control, and that's what they're talking about. Let's do the 5G, Sue, and then we'll have a break.
5G is the 5th generation of wireless data networks, and it will improve them far more than 4G or 3G ever could. You'll feel it in your phone, your home, your car, and in the city and town around you. Downloads and streaming should happen literally without delay. Cars will talk to each other to prevent collisions. An untethered augmented and virtual reality can finally be achieved with real-time response. Not to mention industrial benefits like remote surgery or drone control. 5G does its magic with 3 key abilities. First, high bandwidth. 4G could only muster about 200 megabits per second of data throughput on a good day. 5G can handle up to 1 gigabit or more. That's 1,000 megabits a second on up. Low latency. 4G suffers from around 100 milliseconds or so in response delay or latency. 5G reaction time can be as low as 1 millisecond, which makes everything happen virtually instantly. And dense connections. In a given square kilometer, 4G could only manage to connect about 1/10 the amount of devices as 5G can. If that's some of what 5G does, how does it do it? 5G uses new radio technology, the part of any wireless device that makes the connection. 5G uses some radio frequencies in a band known as sub-6, from 600 megahertz to 6 gigahertz, part of which is also used by current 4G LTE. But 5G will also use a higher band of radio frequencies, from 24 gigahertz to as high as 86. These much higher frequencies bring with them much higher data rates. Now, while these new 5G radio waves can carry more data with higher performance, they can't carry it as far. So 5G will use a lot of so-called small cells. These are small versions of the big cellular towers we all know. 5G will also use some new tricks in these small cells, like beamforming, to efficiently aim transmissions rather than just spray everything everywhere. The bottom line, though, you will need new phones, tablets, portable hotspots, and the like with a 5G radio inside to connect to the new 5G networks. Your current 4G or even 3G gear can't tap into it. 5G networks will also position more data and computing resources closer to you that will avoid blunting 5G's low latency benefits. Most of us do think of phones when we think of wireless networks, but phones may actually be the least interesting thing about 5G. It will also power autonomous cars, so they have awareness of every other car, bike, pedestrian, and traffic signal around them. Smart cities based on 5G can make almost anything that's electric also connected and aware. When a bridge needs repair, why can't it tell someone? With a mesh of 5G connected sensors, it could. And then there's your home. 5G will offer a new way to get internet there, eschewing cable or DSL, and one day maybe even obviating your Wi-Fi router altogether, as devices may just use 5G natively to connect directly to a wireless ISP.
The scariest things about 5G to me is somebody who values his privacy is what they call the small cells. Sue and I live on Lake Wisconsin, and we have Verizon service. It's terrible where we're at. But that's kind of the benefit of living where we're at. If you have cell towers everywhere, and they're called picocells, very small cells. If you have cell towers everywhere, and you have a 5G phone, you got a car, got a whatever, you're connected constantly. Going up the road to La Crosse, right? There's a lot of places where you can't, there's no cell service. On the interstate, it's not bad. But you go up Highway 14 or something like that. But now all of a sudden, if you're trying to hide, and the mark is implemented, and we have basically cell towers everywhere, and I mean everywhere, all of a sudden, there's no way to hide. All right, so it's 9:55. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and we'll 10-minute break, sorry, and we'll show up at 5 after. Okay? Time for a bio break, please. get started again. So we're going to continue talking about technologies that can enable this control that we talk about. Let's talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Machine learning is a very small subset of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence in its ultimate form is basically a capability to think and act and reason just like we do. Sometimes irrationally, but to draw inferences. That's the whole problem with computers these days. The term used to be, I remember when computers first showed up, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you don't do it, I remember Sue and I, when we were getting our undergrad, we had the old IBM 370, and you had a shoebox, and it had all the punch cards in there. And you made one mistake in that punch card, and you had to go back and start over. And woe be gone to the person to drop that box with all of the punch cards in there. Mark's shaking his head. You've been down that road. But the computer could only do the things that you told it to do. Computers actually, I don't know if you know it or not, but the ENIAC was actually developed during World War II to calculate ballistics tables. That's where it started. So there you go. There's another technology use for killing people, right? Artificial intelligence is basically our brains in a computer. To the point where that computer, that machine, can do all the thinking that we do. Humans have the ability to draw inferences from a set of data. Sometimes it's wrong, but you can make that leap. Some people call it the intuitive leap, the gut feeling, the whatever. Computers can't do that right now. Artificial intelligence is moving along. And again, machine learning is a very small subset. I can program a machine learning algorithm to do things for me and to analyze a very specific set of data and draw patterns out of that very specific set of data. Machine learning, that's what machine learning is. Artificial intelligence is, again, basically our brains in a machine, and the ability to draw inferences and the ability to do all the stuff that the Lord has blessed us with. And the only way to analyze all of this data that is being created on a daily, yearly basis is through artificial intelligence. Human beings have the problem of you're sitting there looking at data, and then all of a sudden you start thinking about, oh, I'm going home in 2 hours, and then you miss something. Artificial intelligence, because it's disconnected from the human brain, doesn't have that problem. So you can just give it, the artificial intelligence, a set of tasks, and then you can just tell it, and it'll comb through that data. I just want to look at anybody who crosses this boundary, what's called geofencing. We'll talk about that later. I just want to know anybody who crosses that boundary. I spent years as an intelligence analyst for the Department of Energy. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but if I know your pattern of life, POL, human beings are masters of developing a routine, and we hate to break out of our routine, right? But we, in the intelligence community, use that, because then I can figure out what you're going to do. If I know what you've been doing for the past month, I can predict with probably 95 to 100% certainty what you're going to do tomorrow. That's just the way it is. And it's hard for people to break out of their routine. You know, I drive to work every day along this route. Okay, I see that you drive every day along that route. Oh, he took a left right there, and normally you go straight through that light. Where'd you go? I can watch that. That's an anomaly, and artificial intelligence, machine learning is very good at detecting anomalies. And we, again, like I said, we all love to be in our routine. Let's talk about quantum computing. We've got a little video here on quantum computing. Studied a little bit of quantum mechanics, and it's a very odd world. But quantum computing allows you to do things at almost the blink of an eye. There's a company called D-Wave. I think their references in the back of the presentation. They have developed an actual quantum computer that can have the processing power of 7 billion human beings. Now, a human being is not really that good on a per second basis for processing things. Depending on who you talk to, 60 bits a second. But now multiply that by 7 billion. And that's just the state of the art today. It's not where it's going. It's just the state of the art. Companies are trying to make money. Oh, that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Why is all of this stuff going on? It's to make money. 5G is an example. Since it's a revolutionary step in the communications capability, the MNOs, major network operators, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, I think the big three, stand to make billions. So, okay. And it's amazing how many people buy new smartphones every year. So it's not a big deal. Now, if I wire up everything, that data has to go over a network. I get the charge. As an MNO, I get the charge for that network. So how is this infrastructure being built out? Why is this infrastructure? We'll talk about it a little bit later. Money. That's the driver. Quantum computing is the same thing. If I can process that information and I can do it better and I can be first to the market and I have a viable quantum computing capability, I'm going to make a lot of money. As I said again, let's think of all the financial transactions. If I know what you're going to buy, how many people have looked for something, say on Amazon, and then you go look for a Bible scripture for something that you're studying, and off in the corner, you see ads for what you just looked at, right? That's patterns of life. Hey, I was just looking for chainsaws, and now all of a sudden there's a Husqvarna and a Steel, and an Echo and all those things. That's patterns of life. You were interested in chainsaws, so I'm going to show you all the ads. Again, that's patterns of life. That's data analysis, what they call big data. Quantum computing is the way to be able to go through all of that data. Just think of all the financial transactions globally once we get to a global government and the ability to do that. So I want to make sure that you are not buying things you're not supposed to or whatever. I can look at that. I can look for those anomalies. And eventually, it doesn't take too long, a week maybe. I pretty well know your life. Like I said, as an intelligence analyst, that's what we did. Looked for those patterns of life, then I started looking for anomalies. Okay, Sue. We're going to try it without turning the lights off.
Inspires such mystery and excitement as quantum computing. But what is quantum computing, and what is it destined to change in our lives? First of all, a quantum computer is a new type of computer being developed that uses, instead of a normal processor, a special quantum processor that operates using principles of quantum mechanics. A classical computer, like the one you're watching this video on, whether it be an Android or a laptop, uses bits as its fundamental language of information. Bits are the ones and zeros you think of in computers. Without going too deep into how they work, that might be for another video, quantum computers don't use bits. Instead, they use what are called qubits, which is like a regular bit, but with a quantum spin. So what are these new machines good for? What do they do exactly? As it turns out, quantum computers have a vast advantage over classical computers when it comes to specific operations. So vast, in fact, that scientists often talk about the processing advantage of quantum computers in terms of exponential superiority. And we'll see just how extravagant the benefits get in this installment of Super Freaky Science.
The processing power doubling roughly every 18 months. With quantum computers, it'll go up exponentially in almost a straight line up to the point where the whole 18 months, it'll be a couple minutes.
Few cutting-edge technology.
So anyway, that's the processing power that's necessary to go through all of this data. It's an enormous amount of data, and again, we're going to talk about that later. But you got to figure out, artificial intelligence is the way to analyze it, but you need a machine that can run fast enough to analyze all of that data. Let's talk about the Internet of Things. We talked a little bit about it. I said, like, Sue and I had the fun of trying to buy a stove without internet connection, and it's like, I think Carly, you said the same thing, right? Yeah, it's like, I don't need that. Again, it's getting to the point where even the new toaster you buy, washing machine, whatever. The downside of the Internet of Things is everything's wired together. It can be hacked, and not even hacked, it can be controlled by somebody else. Again, there's a reward benefit, a reward punishment piece of that. Buy my smart whatever, and I'll give you $100 off of your cost, but I get to control it. We're going to talk about smart thermostats here later when we talk about how people do that. So, medical technology. There's several pieces to this. From the control standpoint, go Google Elon Musk. Many years ago, 2014, I actually got to sit in his office one time I was working for the director of NASA Ames Research in Sunnyvale, California. And we went to Elon Musk, and I just sat there. Elon Musk is very interesting. You may be a fan of his, you may not be. But he has come up with this concept of what they call neural implants. He says that it's just to make that man-machine connection without having to stare at a screen. It's just, that way. Problem I have with that is that can be hacked, that can be overridden, and now I can make you think what I want. And if I make you think what I want, the problem is solved. And you say, okay, he's only wanting to do this to make so that you can do this man-machine interface. Okay, I got it. But what if you're not as benign? What if you're not this virtuous person that started the neural implants? Neural implants are also used for several things. One of the things is nerve muscle implants used in the military to bypass where a nerve has been severed, specifically in a leg or something like that. People can walk. But the other side of that coin is once you allow somebody else to do that, then you have real problems, and it can be used for nefarious methods later on. They talk about mRNA vaccines and quantum dots. Quantum dots are basically small, atomic-sized particles that, when subjected to the right interrogator, typically UV light, ultraviolet light, the quantum dots reflect or fluoresce and give you a different color back. And the color's divided by the size. So think of UPC codes, depending on how big they are. Imagine that. We saw a video where the guy had the UPC code on his arm. But imagine that's the size of a mole now on your arm or on your forehead, right? Now all of a sudden, a lot of data can be put in there with that. DARPA, as an example, Defense Advanced Research Projects Administration, DARPA, is working on using mRNA technology to assemble quantum dot tattoos inside the human body. Now, there's some concerns right now. It ain't gonna happen right now because quantum dots are created using metals that are basically toxic to humans, cadmium as an example. So it's not going to happen right away, but they are talking about how to do that. So for those of you who had dog tags, now all of a sudden it's just a tattoo on your body someplace. All your biometric information is there, everything about you. And I can imagine where it gets to the point where now it's going to have all your financial information, how much you're worth at this particular moment, how much is in your bank account, who you are, what you are, everything. And because of the fact that it's mRNA technology, who knows whether or not it's actually happened. So go back, Sue, please. So RNA is so everybody knows what DNA is. We're going to talk about DNA later. RNA is the messenger piece. It takes around all those pieces of DNA and helps you make all of that stuff. mRNA is basically the miniaturized or the molecular pieces of that, and they're using mRNA technology in the COVID vaccines right now as an example. And they're using pieces of genetic material to cause your body to create a weakened COVID so that you develop an immunity to it. So it's pieces of genetic technology that are injected in you and it causes your body to do things. Messenger RNA is really what M stands for, messenger. I said miniature, didn't I? Messenger. Yeah, RNA is basically the messenger inside your body that takes these messages all around and says, okay, I need to create this hormone, I need to do this, and I need to do that. Yeah, again, like I said, it's basically the runners in your body running messages around. Talk a little bit about transhumanism. I talked about nerve muscle implants. The Army is working on, bless you, Bernie. The Army is working on exoskeletons for the soldier. For those of us who hump the pack around, sure would be nice to have something help. I could use it when I'm out hunting these days. But it goes beyond that. Now all of a sudden, you get to a point where you're changing God's designed body into something that isn't. It's something that wasn't meant to be. Some people think transhumanism is because somebody thinks they're a giraffe or something like that. I talk about the fact that you're going beyond what God designed, whatever that may be. That's a method of control just because if I do this transhumanism, I do some sort of surgery on you, I can put in a back door so that maybe you're at my beck and call or my will. Okay, Sue. Okay, neural implants. I talked about it a little bit through Elon Musk's work, but again, the big issue is if I can make you think what I want, I've won, hands down. That's what propaganda is. But now I can go past propaganda. I can tell you that the sky is red. Okay, let's talk about monitoring and tracking technologies. With the Internet of Things, if everything is out there, has a Wi-Fi capability or some sort of wireless capability, it can track you. And not only can it track you, it can pass that information on to another one. We talked about, you showed talked about 5G and the wired cars. So you're traveling down the road and the police are looking for you. There's an APB out for you and your driver's license. Well, most cars are going to have cameras in them. So they're taking pictures of your license plate and it's being passed along from car to car until it gets to where it needs to be. Monitoring and tracking is a big area of a big growth industry for a lot of people, because if I can track where your package is at, how many get the little email with the picture of your Amazon package sitting there on your doorstep, or in our case, somebody else's doorstep, but we recognized who it was and we walked over there and got it? You know, that's monitoring and tracking, and that's instantaneous. The cars, the packages all have codes on them, and the guy lays it down, the lady lays it down at our doorstep, and I get an email, okay? That's just one very small example. There is a lot of capability and a lot of development in being able to track people, being able to track kids. If you all have a dog that's microchipped, that's a tracking technology. RFID chips. The vet just runs a scanner, or the shelter just runs a scanner over the dog's back. Eventually, I mean, a lot of companies are already doing that for their employees to help them bypass scanners or whatever. But of course, now they know where you're going and where you're at. And, so your privacy is going away, and it's just that the monitoring and tracking is getting to the point now where you're tracked on an almost continuous basis. Your phone is doing that.
What was the E911? Thanks.
So E911 stands for Enhanced 911. About 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago in 2010, there was law signed into effect called E911. It used to be if you called 911 and your phone was registered in Albuquerque, I'll give you a specific example. I was a soccer referee for years, and a kid broke his leg, so I called 911. Well, this is before E911. Called 911, and the guy said, "Well, you're in Albuquerque. We'll send a, where are you at in Albuquerque?" "No, sir, I'm in Berlin." And so I had to give them the address. E911 erased all of that. All they had to do was, your phone is being tracked, and so you call an E911, you call 911, everything's in E911 these days. They know exactly where you're at. And you don't have to tell them anything. I'm at whatever the address is. They know exactly where you're at. We'll send somebody right away. So go back to the one, please. Contact tracing. Apple was very proud during the height of the COVID pandemic to put out a app on the Apple phone that if you tested positive, you could enter in some data, and anybody with an Apple phone that had that app would know that you came close to them. Contact tracing, that's what it was, and then it even went further than that. All the universities started doing it. So this monitoring and tracking of your daily life is just getting more and more pervasive. Okay, Sue. You want to go to that next video first, Sue, and then we'll come back to this? There you go.
Geofences are virtual fences or perimeters around a physical location. Geofences detect when someone comes in or leaves the given region. When this happens, it is possible to trigger events and actions, such as sending a notification to the user's mobile phone.
That's great, Daniel, but how does it work?
As a user moves around with her phone, a new position is calculated every now and then from a variety of different sources, such as Wi-Fi and cellular data, GPS, and Bluetooth beacons. The phone uses the updated position to check if the user has entered or left any of the geofences. And in this case, it triggers the corresponding actions. These actions can let the user know that they have entered the geofence, for instance, by displaying a notification. However, they can also be silent without informing the user. Such would be the case if you wanted to track how many times the user has come into your shop and how much time they spend there.
So you say, okay, fine, I don't want my phone to do that. And I'm going to buy a phone that doesn't have that. The point of E911 is any mobile device has to have that capability on there. That's what the E911 law stated. So, well, my mom was still alive. She bought herself a little flip phone. She thought that's all she needed. She said, well, I don't have any of that stuff on there. Mom, look, it's on a flip phone, right? So it's like, you can't buy a mobile device these days without that monitoring and tracking capability.
What if I turn the location app off on my phone?
You have to take the battery out of your phone.
So if I turn location off, I can still be tracked?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Scary.
You know why?
No.
Because even if you turn location off, you're still connecting with cell phone towers, right? Because you want to get a phone call from your wife or your kids or whatever, right? So you're being constantly tracked. Now, the cell phone companies will say, because I need to know whether or not I need to charge you for roaming or not, or being out of my service or whatever. But it's all there. I mean, it's almost on at least a monthly basis. Well, you know, T-Mobile, they got their database hacked and all of this tracking information. Oh, we were selling it. They were selling it to NSA, right? NSA built a big data center in Utah to store all of this stuff. Part of that is because of the Patriot Act signed in 2002 after the 9/11 attacks. But it's all out there. Machine-readable travel documents. When I travel now, I don't know how many of you have been on a plane here lately. You don't give them your ticket anymore. You just give them your driver's license. Or in my case, my ID, my military ID. It's got all that information in there, and they know where you're going. And if you're not flying that day, see you later, you're not getting through security. That's a machine-readable travel document. It's your driver's license. In my case, it's my military ID. The point is, all of those things are specific tickets. I don't know why they even print them anymore, to be honest with you. But they do. You can get a printed ticket. I'm paranoid, so I don't believe my phone's something's gonna happen to it, so I always have a paper ticket in my hand, but that's just me. Facial recognition-based attendance system. Did anybody see the news yesterday that 3 Marines who were in the Capitol building on January 6th were charged with illegal entry, and they were through facial recognition. Now that was just looking at the video. Facial recognition these days has gotten a lot more sophisticated, and then you can look at up to 85 different features on your face to identify who you are. If you've bought a laptop here in the past year, most cell phones, anything, an iPhone 13 as an example, has facial recognition on there. And it's not just notifying it's you, but they're getting to the point where they can identify your views, what you're thinking, how you're feeling. During the height of the Lamarck, when whoever is around is going to be made to worship, I guarantee you're going to be doing something on your phone or whatever, and they're going to be watching you, see whether or not you're doing this joyfully. That's where facial recognition is going. Schools do that right now. Most universities, either some sort of facial recognition attendance system or whatever. And then smartphone-based tracking. So to your point, you don't have to have location services on. All that does is help the apps know where you're at.
What if I turn the phone off?
Unplug it. You got to take the battery out.
Take the battery out?
Yeah. It is not off. It is in a quiet state. But you are constantly, it's still pinging the cell towers, pinging the whatever. Because when you turn it on, it doesn't take like it used to register where it's at. It knows exactly where you're at already. So it can go with the cell towers and those sorts of things. You can say what you want about what happened on January 6th of 2021, but by looking at whose cell phone pinged, they were able to, that's how they got most of those 900 folks that they talked about charging with either being in the Capitol or somewhere around there. And more recently, the University of Idaho murders, the police was able to figure out where that fellow was at by just looking at where his cell phone pinged. He had his off, because then he would say, well, he turned it back on when he got back home. How did they know he was in that vicinity, not once, but several times, right? Because he would say, I had it off. So, like I said, you got to take the battery out. And I've looked at this. I don't know how to get that battery out of there. I'm a tinkerer, so I like to look at that stuff. Next. Okay, so we did the geofences. Geofences, the cell phone-based tracking, if I know where you're going in and out, I can make sure that you don't go to places I don't want you to. It used to be with the GPS collar or whatever, but now with your phone, I know if you're in a place I don't want you to be. Okay, so we've talked about several technologies. We're going to get to the questions, but I wanted to talk about some of the organizations. This is just a few of what's going on. The World Economic Forum, go look at the transcripts of what was said this week over in Davos about the digital global currency. And like I said, it's very interesting to me how open they are about all this these days. Chinese Communist Party. Most people have some sort of social or digital presence, whether in Facebook or whatever. Sue and I do the Facebook because we get to stalk our kids. Because we don't ever hear anything. We got to look at Facebook to figure out what's going on. The Chinese Communist Party is using Facebook and things like that. Everything is in China, it all has to go through one app. I forget what the name of it is. But there's a social credit score. How well you're supporting the government and whatever. And if your credit score is low enough, you don't get to do certain things. Facial recognition. TSA is talking about going to facial recognition instead of even your driver's license or your ticket. So how they're going to do that, I don't know, but they're talking about because they can't find the people to man the checkpoints anymore. That's just, there's a whole bunch of organizations that are out there doing various things. Okay, Sue, let's do the facial recognition. This is over in China.
At Beijing's Shifan University, the female students are now using their face to open doors. A facial recognition system has been installed in the women's dormitories to add an extra layer of security. It's one of several institutions adopting the new technology, which has been designed and developed in China.
It's a good idea because it can make students more safe. Some strangers may be very dangerous when they into the dojo, and I think it's a safe idea.
Facial recognition is being rolled out at an extraordinary rate as the Chinese government aims to become a global leader in artificial intelligence. This tech startup in Beijing has benefited from the billions being poured into research and development. At their offices, there's no need for a fob or card. Your face is key.
We can see a lot of faces in the screen. So you can see a lot of feature points and a face. Each face here will have 83 feature points.
They say soon you won't need your wallet or even your phone.
So one of the things to think about with this is, okay, facial recognition. I know where you were at, I know when you were there, and I know how many times in a day you do that, right? It's not just saying, oh, it's you, come on in. Do you see that one fella, he was walking up to the door and it took an image of his face, and the door opened up. Think about how many traffic cameras are out there. Think about how many cameras are out there all over the place, Ring doorbells, whatever. Combine that data with the ability to do facial recognition and the ability to discern, at least at some level, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, whatever. You can see where that would go. Again, people will tell you, no, it's got a benign purpose. I want to make sure these girls are safe. I agree. One thing I wanted to talk about was, as these technologies come out and they roll out and we talk about them, the mRNA technology, the quantum dot tattoos, whatever, is that the mark of the beast? If you take that, does that mean you've taken the mark? No, because we haven't even gone into the tribulation period. The convenience is there. God has allowed that to happen, whatever it is, might as well take advantage of it while it's going on. Just understand where this is going to go. And again, like I said, since I see cyber threat briefings on a regular basis, I don't do a lot of stuff. Sue and I have been in the Chinese database since, what, about 2012, Sue? Yeah, give or take. I remember the first email we got saying, hey, Chinese hacked our database, and so now you get permanent financial monitoring and things like that. So we've been involved in the federal government since mid-70s, almost 50 years. So there's all of our data, thumbprints, or whatever, fingerprints. So the point is, that information's out there. It was interesting to me, after my mom passed away this past August, I was looking online. My mom never had a digital presence of any kind, but there was still all kinds of stuff. And it took a while to sort of wipe all that away. So you're paying taxes, you're paying utility bills, even if you're using a check. You know, your check anymore is scanned and debited almost immediately from your account. The check doesn't go and Alliant doesn't take it down to the University of Wisconsin Credit Union and they cash it and it's scanned and it's automatically done. So it's already a lot. All of you have a digital presence out there right now. And so being able to track you and pay attention to what you're doing is there. Okay, so we've talked about the technologies. Let's talk about these 7 questions. Talked about it a little bit in the sense of, wait a minute, how can that total control that you imply, how can you do that? We're going to talk about that and show why. I think you can get that from what I said, but let's just talk about it. Again, like I said, we talk about this stuff, and again, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to tell you not to deal with technology, not to take advantages of it the way it is. Go ahead. I mean, you ought to. It's there. And it's not, if you end up with a quantum dot tattoo, you're not taking the mark. I think part of the mark is not just the physical piece, but it's the spiritual piece, and if you don't make that distinction and you don't make that jump, availing yourselves of these technologies, I don't believe is. That's my opinion, and I ask you to do your own research as well. And again, like I said, don't fear the technology. It's a great convenience. People love the fact that they don't have to cart cash around. I do. My brother and I were about the same age. It's funny. He carries around a whole wad of cash. He's even more paranoid about the digital currency and the ATMs and everything than I am. And we're both in the same business. Okay. So what's the big deal? I'm not going to take the mark, so why do I care? Got it. I understand. And I'm not either, assuming I'm here. But with that total control, the buying and selling specifically, how are you going to pay your taxes? How are you going to buy the food you need? How are you going to transact anything? Okay? Because I think in the beginning, just my opinion, we as Christians will be persecuted, just like the Lord has told us, kind of like the Jews were in the early parts of the Nazi regime. They weren't all immediately marched off to death camps. Anybody remember what Kristallnacht meant? Or the Night of 1,000 Knives? All of those things, everything that the Germans did to the Jews leading up to the death camps, I think was actually a trial run for what's going to happen. So that's why you have to care, because you get right with the Lord, that decision's going to be easy, and I'm hoping if I can knock one person off the fence on the R side, cool. And again, like I said, remember all that buying and selling? Everything that you do on a daily basis? That's all going to go away. Go back to that one, Sue. Did I miss something? Yeah. What if you have to take the mark to get your grandchild's medicine? If you're not right with the Lord, it might be very tempting. Okay, Sue. So how is it possible to have such control? I'm going off the grid. They ain't going to find me. How are you going to pay your taxes? No matter where you are in the U.S. or Alaska, anywhere, you got to pay taxes. Okay, you got to pay taxes, property taxes. Unless you know, so how are you going to pay those taxes? I submit to you these days, there's no such thing as truly going off the grid. Okay, fine. You're not hooked up to the electrical system. You don't have internet. How are you going to pay your taxes? Somebody has record someplace of you owning that property. And again, all your physical dollars have been confiscated. And again, I talk about the reward punishment piece. Eventually, they're going to get to the point where they're going to take all the physical dollars. There will be no physical currency being used. Or there will be a penalty for it. And if you don't turn it in, you suffer the consequences. Remember the truckers' protests of was it April? I think it was April of 2022. A lot of those guys couldn't access their bank accounts. That was over people just protesting having to get a vaccine. Imagine what happens when the Antichrist shows up and says you can't do anything. The point is, this is not theoretical. This is going to happen. It's already happened. Again, I don't know how to keep, I shouldn't keep pressing that, but I think I have to, because it's not theoretical. Again, like I said, if you look at writings from the 1900s, or even the early 2000s, even the early 20th century, 1900s, excuse me, talking about the issue of there's no way to control people with the mark. I think we're past that point these days. Okay, Sue. Okay. Well, who's building the infrastructure? The MNOs, the mobile network operators, the United States government, the rural electrification process back in the 30s and 40s, where they tried to get electricity out to everybody. I saw that the town of Lodi, as an example, is trying to obtain a grant to push broadband internet out to people who don't have it. All of that infrastructure is being put into place. Go down the interstate, as an example, it's fairly good wireless coverage. There might be some places like between here and La Crosse, especially on the interstate, but it's building out. So that Verizon guy's been all over, except here at Lodi. But the point is that the infrastructure is being built. Did you know that, so in the US, we went through wired telephone lines and wired electric lines. That process in the 1900s up until 60s or 70s. Africa, as an example, third world countries are skipping that piece. And they're going directly to using cell phones. Elon Musk's Starlink, what they call the string of pearls. If you want to talk about urban mechanics, we can show why it's a string of pearls, but that's a separate issue. But that's all being wired up. So I give everybody a cell phone. And now all of a sudden they have connectivity, but I know where they're at. So again, that convenience has a price. So we talked a little bit about this, but current data generation in the globe on a yearly basis at zettabytes, that's a 1 with 21 zeros after it. That's an enormous amount of data. So it's 1 with 21 zeros after it. First computer I bought in 1985, an IBM AT, had 20 megabytes of storage. That's 20 with 6 zeros after it. So you can see how much data is being created on a regular basis. And you say, okay, fine, that's just so much data. There's no way to store it and there's no way to go through it. Well, NSA has built the one they'll tell you about in Utah, the Data Storage Center, where they suck up everything and they store it all. But even that isn't enough. Well, enter DNA storage. And go look at MIT's work on storage using DNA. It's kind of expensive, but they'll work on it and get it down to where it needs to be. All of that data, go down to the bottom line, fits into a cube approximately 4 inches on a side using DNA storage. And that's just not a theoretical piece, it's being done. Yeah, it's still in a laboratory, but it's being done right now. So that's a cube 4 inches on a side. That's not that big. So that data is out there and it can be stored, and it'll be stored forever. It's amazing. Every so often you'll see some story in the news and it's like, Shazam, the federal government said they were going to get rid of all of this data doing what? You know, something, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, Shazam, they didn't get rid of it. It's amazing to me when people are surprised that that happens because they suck it all up. Big data analytics these days is what they call it, is a big, big growth industry for commercial people developing AI and machine learning algorithms. And the bigger the data, the more they salivate over it. Let's talk about, so I'm talking about the state of things now. I'm not talking about what it is even in 10 years. A quantum computer, 7.5 foot cube can analyze an exabyte of data. 1 exabyte is 1/1000th of a zettabyte. So I can process all of that data that we just talked about, that 80 zettabytes, in 1,000 seconds, or approximately 17 minutes. In the military, that's called near real time. So you go into Starbucks and you buy your whatever. 17 minutes later, worst case, and again, that's today, somebody somewhere can know that you did that. Hey, Tom, you're not supposed to be in that. You can't be drinking caffeine or whatever. So I've heard people say, well, I'm going to hide in the noise. There's no noise because all the noise is being looked at. I'm going to hide in the noise, meaning there's so many transactions going on. How are they going to pick mine out? Well, they want to pick yours out. You come to the recognition, the notice of the authorities. They know how to get there. And again, I talk about this is the state of the art right now. Again, think about what it is in 20 years, 10 years. Why is that data storage necessary? Again, as I point out, if I know everything about you, I can control you. I know what you're going to do. I know when you're going to do it. I know how often you're going to do it. And again, all of us love a routine. And as soon as you veer off of that routine, I may go send my local global cop to see you. And again, like I said, as an intelligence analyst, if I know what your pattern of life is, I can tell when you're not doing what I think you're supposed to be doing. And if I'm controlling you, I want you to do what you're supposed to be doing. Because again, like I said, most humans are creatures of habit. We love our routine. I mean, how many of us, when the kids were younger and the time changed and they get all thrown out of whack? Even then, even when the kids are young, even when we're young, we want a routine. So you say, how can people tolerate this? Well, everybody loves the convenience. You can say what you want about the vaccine, but a lot of people took it, right? So you could say, okay, fine, we did that. Whether it's good or bad, people do that. We're going to see a video here in a little bit. A lot of times with the Patriot Act as an example of 2002, that was considered to make us more safe. But it tracked all of your financial transactions. It tracked where you're going, everything. And you can see what Ben Franklin says about liberty and security. Tolerate the control. The average human these days, average American, spends about 3.5 hours a day viewing content. If you step back from that and think about what you're watching, there's propaganda in there in every way. I think it was von Ribbentrop, the German minister of information, said, if I tell you a lie often enough, you'll believe it. I'm paraphrasing. It doesn't matter what it is. Kids these days, but it's not just kids, spend all the time. Go on a plane, people, until the time they're yelling at you to turn the thing off, people are doing stuff. And as soon as the plane lands, as soon as the wheels are down, people are doing that. So it's easy to put information in there. And it's easy to sway your opinion because so much time is spent viewing content. And it's all kinds of content. Go ahead and run the video, Sue.
Right now, you're being subtly conditioned to take the mark of the beast, so that when it comes, it seems like the most natural thing to do. This conditioning is so subtle, we need to discuss these 5 means society is using to brainwash you, so that you can see it happening and then reject it. That's what we're talking about today, and we're starting right now. Many of our viewers are aware of the phrase, boil the frog slowly. If you're not, the idea of this analogy is that if you place a frog in a pot of boiling water, he'll jump right out. But if you raise the temperature slowly, he will hardly notice the incremental change until it's too late. So incremental change is part of the conditioning process. The other part of the process is to reward you or punish you based on the desired behavior. For instance, if the frog was fed while he was in the pot, it would be more difficult for the frog to jump out when he finally noticed the ever-increasing temperatures. Reward and punishment is conditioning as well. And Satan looks at you and me as the frogs, and he is whispering suggestions on how to condition us in the ears of those who serve him, and guess what? They're doing it. First, let's look at a simple example some of our viewers are already aware of. As other prophecy teachers have rightly pointed out, the simple act of taking a temperature in order to enter a store, a doctor's office, has become routine during this pandemic. Taking your temperature is essentially a good thing, as it protects other people from the virus. But it's conditioning us to have our bodies scanned in order to receive a service. It's making it a habit. And that is the deceptive conditioning. As a healthcare worker, I have to allow myself to be scanned for temperature on a daily basis, and my guess is this is not going away anytime soon. But in the near future, I think the scan will be expanded to include biometric indicators, a facial scan. There are even some of these available on a smartphone. Now, we have accepted the temperature scan The heat of the frog pot then will be raised, so to speak, by adding facial recognition. This will allow those scanning you to assess a database. In a doctor's office, this will allow the doctor to assess your health data. In a store, it will allow the employees to assess your financial data, or possibly even your vaccine status, to see if you took the vaccine or not. So taking a simple temperature is conditioning us to accept the physical act of being scanned daily. But there is also a reward punishment built in. The reward is you're able to participate in the economy. You're able to go into the doctor's office or into the store. In my healthcare facility, patients are not allowed to enter unless they have their temperatures taken and their temperatures are within a certain range. The same is true for some stores. That is a moderately big punishment for not being scanned. This is conditioning us also to accept a punishment for not being scanned.
It was a good thing to make sure you're not passing on the virus to other folks who might be sicker or weaker than you. But again, it's also a conditioning piece where you're being conditioned to do things that you're told to do without complaining. Okay. During the height of it, Dane County had a mask mandate. Okay, you didn't want to go shopping there in Dane County? Go up to Portage County. So no big deal. But what happens, there was that bit of time where they had it across the state. You couldn't participate in the economy. And again, I'm not talking about whether or not that was a good idea or a bad idea. As the guy pointed out, I'm talking about the issue of conditioning us to accept these things as part of life. Anyway, next, Sue. Let's talk about some of these things that are you being controlled, these controls being implemented. How many have heard of ESG? It's called environmental safety, environmental, societal, and governance. Right now, the big thing is environmental. Banks are being told they can't invest in coal companies, in fossil fuel companies. And these banks that are doing that are also suffering the consequences of doing that. That's part of the environmental. The Chinese are doing the societal piece, which is basically support me, support what's going on. And the governance is, again, do you have the right form of government to be able to participate in the economy? There's a lot of stir going on inside of the press, inside of Congress, at the state level, as to how ESG is going to go. I have no idea how that's going to go. But again, you can see that people are being conditioned to do things the way other people want you to do it. That's the point, not the fact that it may or may not be a good thing. Government control of your smart thermostat. In Texas, it was called Smart Saver Texas. Yeah, Smart Savers Texas. People got some break on their utility bill by having a smart thermostat. Unfortunately, that smart thermostat was connected to the internet, and it was connected to the local utilities. So, how many remember what happened last, I think it was February, a year ago, when they had all the problems with the heat, and they had a lot of problems with keeping everybody safe in their houses, comfortable in their houses. So they started dialing down, the government, the utility started dialing down people's thermostats. Or up, as the case may be. Colorado did it and didn't even tell people. So anyway, so the issue of vaccine mandates is not so much whether or not you should have got the vaccine or whatever. It's again, you're being conditioned for somebody to tell you what you should do with your body. That's the conditioning, that piece. And again, that's where I believe Satan is active in this world, is he's turning the heat up. Social media censorship. We all seen a lot, I suspect, about what's happening with Twitter, Facebook. You can agree or disagree with the views that people were putting on there, but when you start shutting down free speech, regardless of whether or not you agree with it or not, you can see where that's going to start propagating itself into, okay, I'm a Christian, and if I'm not here, I'm in Nevada or something like that, I watch Pastor Robert online. Well, maybe that gets shut down because, you know, you're a Christian and you're a bigot. So that's where that's going. It happens right now. It happens in China all the time. Sometimes I think China is a test ground for a lot of this stuff. Sue, next. Okay. So basically, yeah. Basically, that's it. I got one more video we'll show, but that was it. So I wanted to ask now, what, did you want to take a break and then come back and watch that last video? Or did you want to, I want to ask you, what did I not cover that you thought I was going to cover? How much did I dwell too much on certain things? Would you like to see other information? Would you like another session like this of other things along these lines? Cheryl.
I was a beta tester for a chat thing, and it's now gone public, but I was wondering how that, if that's like the next step. So when we were beta testing it, I could say, I want this written about this. Okay, now I want you to make it humorous. Now I'd like you to make it, and it sounded like the way I spoke,
right,
and the way I talked, whereas I have tried for years to get people to do my writing for me because I don't know grammar well. And this program makes me sound like me, and people couldn't tell the difference, and I just had to speak, and it would do it. And I think it's even out publicly now, and I mean, it's a great thing, but I could see a lot of real problems with it.
Right. So what Cheryl's talking about is the starting prevalence of software programs capabilities. This is some form of AI where you could have this program write for you, okay? In the vernacular that Cheryl tends to use, so when do you get to a point where, is it Cheryl or is it that computer, that program writing that? That's part of the whole social media thing because it's too easy for that sort of thing. And there's ghosting all the time, right? That's why, like I said, Sue and I, Facebook, we stalk our kids and the rest of our family, but we rarely post things. You know, I catch a fish out in Lake Wisconsin, I might post that, but that's it, right? Don't post anything. Sue's brother is constantly in Facebook jail because of the way he goes off on things. And it's like, how do you know it's him? Well, because I've known him for 40 years, so. But is that what you're asking about, Cheryl?
Yeah, because they're doing it in other areas too.
Yep.
So they can almost imitate who you are.
Yeah.
And what you believe in, they can.
They can put words in your mouth, basically. Yeah. Yep. What else? I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Linda.
Linda?
Mark's sister.
Yes, yes. No, Linda.
Yeah. Also with that, I saw a story and how they're going to bring it into the spiritual world is that the non-believers or even believers that believe in going to psychics and things like that are using this program already to, let's just say, get the voice of your relative from beyond the grave and to hook you into their thing so that they will give you information of what your grandma thinks you should be doing and all this sort of stuff. So that is already implemented by the dark side of spiritualism heavily.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the other part I just wanted to say earlier, because actually since the late 70s, early 80s, just due to a boyfriend that I had at the time, who is as wise as you are on these things, came, you know, and so I was very depressed for the first 10 years of finding out the running program. But see, that was in the early 80s that I heard about all this stuff. And I've just watched it come to fruition. And it also deepened then my relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because I have to refer to it constantly where he says, "Fear not, for I am the Lord thy God. Fear not, I am with you. Fear not." And so through many walks and places I've been to, because I also worked for a high-tech inventing place when I lived on the East Coast. So I saw a lot of this stuff coming down, of course, and that was, decades ago now.
Right.
So I think the Lord showed me this stuff that early so I could stop being so scared about it, depend more on him, to listen for his voice through the Holy Spirit, and then truly the guidance is there. You just have to make sure that you don't buy into the fear first.
Yeah.
And so with that, and especially how they're going to what I would just, just because it's the terminology of the day, the pagan world, is that they have all these subtle ways of bringing it in. A, always through convenience. B, through your ego saying, "Oh, I know more than you know." And C, through your compassionate self of, "Oh, that's my mother, my dad, my granddad,
Yep.
whatever, my pet dog." And so I just want to reiterate many times, God is great in giving us the information, and he also is there to guide us through without fear.
And if I may, I want to bounce off of what Linda and Cheryl have said. When you see these things on Facebook or whatever, and you look at these videos that are on YouTube, please, please, please be a Berean. Make sure it's what God would say, okay? Bounce that against the Bible all the time. You see so much stuff. Again, like I said, remember early, garbage in, garbage out. If you've got the Lord on your side, I think you can discern what's going on. But if you're going to use your own understanding to read what you're seeing and to listen to what you're seeing, you're going to get in trouble.
I just add one more thing to
Sure.
that because of my studying more of the word along the way is please keep a copy of the King James Version of the Bible with you, because I don't remember how many years ago, if it was more than 5 or 10, when Tyndale, Tyndale himself was a great man in the word, but they started changing the word and the phrasing of what the interpretation of God's word is from the Greek and the Hebrew, so that it is far away from what was said, even though it's the King James Version, but the Lord will always open the light of the words that are in the Bible, no matter if it's King James or not, but they have found that the New International Version and some other Tyndale products, when they're sent, especially to other countries first, are not saying what the original word said.
So you want to do that last one? We'll do that. And if nobody else has any other questions, there's one more video for you, and then we'll wrap it up. It'll be about 11:30.
There is an agenda underway. It is something that many of us have feared, yet few have welcomed it. So I want to ask you all a great question. How many of you are fond of the idea of the government tracking you? And I'm not talking about just tracking your location, but your emotions. How many of you like the idea of microchip implants and RFID scanning? And see, it's not really the technology itself, but the agenda behind it. And the main problem people have with this is the loss of privacy and freedom. Think about this. These types of technologies we heard about years and years ago. The technology that is available to the public, that's for the public. How advanced do you think this technology is in the private sector, in the military? We live in an age of quantum computing, artificially intelligent programming, mobile and wireless technology, and we have only experienced a taste of what these tech companies have in store for us. So how about we take a look at how far we have come with technology, how far we have come with microchip implants, and just how deep we are in the system of the beast. So, before we get into this, if you haven't heard already, Apple and Google are coming together to build and release a new app, the purpose of which is to track the virus. It will be voluntary at first until it gets to a point where you can opt out. And what it will do is, if you are tested positive for this virus and your information is in this app, anyone who also has this app will be alerted when you are in close proximity to them. I'm guessing you can all imagine the issues arising as a result from this programming. You know what they have? Tracking for college students through classroom apps so that the professor knows who's in class and who is not. Professional sports organizations have tracking for their players. They've been tracking animals, tracking objects, mobile devices, laptops, totes, pallets, people, RFID, GPS, geofencing, ultrasonic and audible tracking through apps. Now, if you don't know what that is, let me tell you. Some years ago, there were quite a few companies that were engaged in developing mobile apps that could send out sound waves that cannot be heard by the human ear. Ultrasonic waves, something above 18 kilohertz. So the device sends out this frequency that can now be picked up by other device microphones in proximity that are listening. The sounds that the app puts out has data embedded into it, not through Wi-Fi, mind you, through sounds that the app puts out. And this beacon can now create connections with other devices around you, like a smart TV. It can allow advertisers to create a profile on you, whether you are online or not. It will connect to your friends and family's devices, and yes, it can pinpoint your exact location. Even if you're in a store, it knows exactly where you are inside the store. This is a mobile app, folks. This is what they can do with just a single mobile app. The same technology can be used to identify users of the Tor network. Think about that. And the thing is, it's old technology. It's old. And even though all that sounds creepily invading, in the right hands, for those of you who are tech savvy, the tech itself could become useful to you. Just keep that in mind. Cell phones, with all the apps, and Google, even if you turn off your location, with Google, you have to go into settings and deactivate web and app activity, and then turn off your location history. Using Google Maps stores your location history. If you access your Instagram or an app like it, it has location tracking you have to turn off. And phones today, you have to put that thing in a lead coffin before bed if you don't want it to transmit anything. Railroad and car tracking tech, airport tracking, airport iris scanners, body scanners, bag RFID tracking, height profiling, facial recognition, fingerprint scanning, screen and walk concealed device detection, beacons. Look, they track UFOs. What type of technology do you need to do that? I haven't even mentioned the satellite tracking technology yet. You know, when it comes to microchipping or radio frequency identification, remember, I said the best way to get someone to do something is to make them want to do it. Well, I want to share an article with you. The headline reads, "Surveillance used to be a bad thing. Now, we happily let our employers spy on us." When reading through this article, there was something that caught my eye. There was a caption beneath the photo of a man, as you can see, is happily being injected with an RFID chip. And the caption reads, "By generating an endless flow of data about our bodies, we feed our narcissistic urge to explore the most fascinating thing in our lives, ourself." How many of you agree with that statement? So it says here, radio frequency identification, RFID, is now being used by companies to follow their employees around the building, recording who they interact with and registering if they spend too much time lingering in toilets. And I know you're thinking, oh, give me a break. Really? Here's what's interesting. It reads, "Bio-tracking technology allows bosses to record the number of steps an employee takes in a day, their heart rate, and what they eat and drink, how much sleep they get, and even their hormone levels. Neural technologies such as increasingly cheap EEG scanners enables overly inquisitive firms to monitor the activity in their employees' brains. Now companies are literally getting under their employees' skin. Last month, a small Wisconsin-based vending machines company called 3 Square Market shot to global prominence when it offered employees the opportunity to implant a small device about the size of a grain of rice under their skin. This RFID-enabled device allowed its proud new owners to do things such as log into their computer, open doors, and purchase food in the office cafeteria with a flick of the wrist.
Again, the video's embedded in there, so you can see the rest of it as well. The RFID chips, I mean, it's what dogs have right now, right? We're not dogs, but eventually we're all going to get that as well. It'll have all your biometric data, everything on it, everything about you. Okay, so again, like I said, there's the references. Darla will have a copy of this if you all want to have it. Ma'am.
Tom and Sue, I just didn't understand a lot of this, but we just appreciate you so much for putting this together because I thought it was extremely interesting. And we're lucky to have Eric Schmidt, who live streamed it for us.
Yes.
Mark and I haven't talked to him yet, but I can't wait to share this with our children, whether or not they watch the whole thing or whatever, and sharing it with my brother and my sister, and it's really nice that it was live streamed today too, and
Yeah.
just thank you so much.
Yeah, so as Eric pointed out, some of the videos may have been shut down by YouTube. That's why they're embedded in this.
And then from what you're sending me?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so then that way, if it does, fine, it's there. Anything else? Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being attentive. I didn't hear any snoring, so that's a good idea. That's a good thing. Mark.
I do have one quick one. When we went through the 7 questions, the idea that we're being conditioned is obvious, but I was wondering when you, and maybe I had missed the first 5 or so minutes, what is the indication that we're actually taking the mark of the beast versus just moving along?
I think it's going to be announced. It's not going to be subtle, in my view. I mean, from what I read in Revelation, I think it's going to be announced. You're going to know.
Yeah. I knew we had to accept it, or it
Right.
wasn't that it would be forced on us, but with the subtle nature of the conditioning, I just wasn't sure what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think, well, because it's not just and Pastor Robert helped me out here, but it's not just a isolated incident. Everything else is going on, right? And so that's, the abomination of the temple and all those things. All of that's going to happen. I mean, so Mark's wanting to know when we think we might know that the mark is being foisted upon us. And because if you look at the book of Revelation, it's not just that thing in and of itself, it's everything else that's going on around it as well. So.
A lot of it, pardon me too, with, because this has been a troubling force within my soul for a long time too, and over the decades, some things indicate that it'll be one, for the mind, on the forehead, is because you will worship him. Give him worship and give him praise, because that's the big thing that the Antichrist wants is, or Satan wants, is the Lord's praise. And two, when the mark in the hand is that you will do his works.
Yeah.
So that all these things here are scary little things to make you always afraid that you've taken it, which creates a different chaotic system within the body also. But if you'll know if you're going to be worshiping Satan or you're going to be worshiping the Lord. You'll know if you're doing the work of Satan or you're doing the work of the Lord.
Yeah.
And whether that is the truth or not as to what the mark truly comes down to, I don't know. But it helped me understand that it's far-reaching more than a physical manifestation of a technology.
Yeah. Matt?
Thanks, Tom, for putting all the information together and sharing all the information. I found it very helpful to see how technology can be leveraged to take away freedom. And I do think we need to look at that and think about that. I do also think we need to be somewhat careful in our eschatology and how we try to interpret modern events in light of Revelation.
Oh, yeah.
So I just think we need to use care there and realize that there's different theological interpretations. The more Reformed theology sees some of these events already taking place.
Yep.
With Nero and Dennison. So there's an already but not yet view with what's happening in end times. I just think we need to be careful with how we try to interpret modern events. I think we need to have our eyes wide open, but I also think we need to use some care there. And I think most importantly, I think Matthew 6:34 comes into play, where it says, "Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day has its own trouble." We're all in the hands of the Lord. We don't know the day or the hour. He does, and we just need to be true to him. So I really appreciate all the information. I think we need to have our eyes wide open, but ultimately I think we can trust in him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what I always tell folks, Matt, is we're all playing for the same team, and we know what's going to happen in the end. Kind of what happens between now and then, okay, we might have differences. But like I said, we're playing for the same team. And with that, we're done. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, but I enjoy doing these sorts of things. And so when I'm asked to do it, Tom, thank you. I enjoy doing this.